Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturian Society.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, hello.
We're going to talk about writing, and it's so exciting. And how many times can I rhyming? Nope, can't do it. That would have been awesome, but I can't. So if you're new to the Scripturian Society, that over there is Karissa Harlow, aka Lewis, and I'm Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien. You're welcome. And yeah, congratulations, everybody.
You have found us.
You have found us.
Your life is about to change.
Yeah. This week is Thanksgiving. So when this comes out, yesterday was Thanksgiving. We hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving.
Yep. Got to spend some good quality time with family and eat good food. Not necessarily in that order of importance.
Yeah. I was going to ask Karissa, what are your Thanksgiving plans? But really at this point, it'll be, what did you do yesterday?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
We have to predict the future.
Yeah.
In retrospect. Anyway,
so predicting your future, what did you do yesterday?
Well, I did essentially nothing. My cousin should be getting married tomorrow. So we will be in transit, essentially getting ready to pack and then head up to Phoenix where she's getting married. So
nice. Yep. See, for my Thanksgiving yesterday, quote unquote, I'm assuming I will have had a variety of junk foods. And I'm only cooking one thing this year. I'm making a chocolate like fudge pie because it's
not even a traditional Thanksgiving thing.
It's not even, but it's really yummy. And I've made it a few years now and I'm going to make it again, but it's just going to be Javi and I. That's literally it. So I'm like, wouldn't you rather have burgers? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, we're going to just get burgers then.
Yeah. My whole family, except for me and my parents, are going up today, Friday. And so they were all busy yesterday. This is weird to talk about in this.
I know.
So we're the only ones that are going up tomorrow or later today. I don't remember. I don't know what the plan is, but anyway, there's no family in town. There was no family in town to really do anything with.
Thanksgiving with. Yeah. Our family all moved we didn't have that much left in this area, but they're all moved down to Houston. So yeah. I don't mind though. We didn't do that much for Thanksgiving before. It's not like a huge holiday for my family like Christmas is. So although I think our Christmas is going to be really small too, but I'm okay with Thanksgiving just being Javi and I. We're just going to eat junk food and watch the game. And I might even get some time to write. Yay. Because you guys, I finally did it. I finally got to do some hardcore NaNoWriMo work and focus down. My outline for my new book, complete. I have the full outline start to finish. There should be no writer's block because everything is planned out. I might lack inspiration here and there, but there should be no, I wonder what comes next because I wrote it out in detail. I wrote an outline that is 6 or 7 pages long, which was not my intention going in, but apparently that's what it's going to be. And I'm kind of loving it. So it's very exciting.
Awesome.
You'd like it. I wrote something in there that was pretty graphically violent. I was like, Karissa will approve of this part.
Love it.
Which I never do.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's good. I have a confession. I have essentially quit NaNoWriMo at this point. I really meant to, but I don't know that my heart was fully in it. And so now I have reverted back to the thing I said I wasn't going to do, and I'm working on book 5 in my series. In my defense, it is a pretty big rewrite, but I have no excuse.
I see. I don't care about NaNoWriMo specifically because NaNoWriMo is such a commitment and we all have lives and important things to do. I just want you to write another thing for fun.
Know. I do too. And I think part of the problem is that it's been so long since I've written something new that I almost don't remember how to do it. And
that's kind of what I was feeling with this one too, because I keep, it's my brain kept trying to find ways to work on other things that I've done that do need work. Like the one I've mentioned a few times on the podcast that needs a bit of a rewrite and then I could query it again. I'm like, you could just do that, Ash. But then I was like, but you actually have a really good idea that you could just write a new book first and then go back and do that. But every time I try and start a new book, my brain is like, what have you already finished we can go back to? But this is the first time in definitely over a year that I'm resisting and I'm trying to work on this one.
Right.
I still hear the sirens call. My other book.
That should be a tagline one day. For years. I still hear the sirens call.
It totally should be.
I think my issue is that, so I started writing this book series when I was 13, back when I was a terrible writer. And so in all of the rewrites, that's really how I became a good writer and like actually honed the skill.
Oh yeah.
And so now I almost don't know how to start from a skilled place, if that makes sense. I only know how to write a really, really terrible first draft, and all first drafts are terrible, but I'm talking like real bad. and then working from there, I'm like, okay, this time I don't have to have 4,000 edits on the same book. I can actually start maybe 50 out, something like that.
Exactly.
And I think that's almost panicking my brain and putting a lot of pressure on it. And I don't know. It's just so hard for me to write something new now. So I will get over it. I have to do it, but I just didn't this time around.
That's okay. You've got all the other months of the year to do it. NaNoWriMo is not, they just like the alliteration. It's not specifically a month that is cosmically better for writing.
It's true. I also had a weird moment of what would you call it? Existential panic the other day. I was looking through all of my writing ideas, like, all right, maybe I can write a short story or just get something new done. And I have so many ideas and I'm like, I will not live long enough to do all of these. And I just had this moment of panic of like, which one do I even do next?
That's funny. So I get that. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I keep thinking like, you know what? I want to be busy all the time with writing and books and publishing and podcasts and business stuff. And then I think, actually, you know what? I want to live a really simple life where I just, like homestead and like don't have to even go to the store because I'm homesteading all the time. And then I'm like, well, you literally can't do both of those things because they're both way too time consuming. You can do a little bit of both. So I think it's going to be, I have a chicken coop, and maybe a goat. But that I'm not going to be able to like subsist or whatever, on what I'm
fully independent.
I'm not going to be able to be fully independent and then also do this like artistic stuff I want to do.
Right.
I can't have it all.
Sad.
They say you can, but that's a lie. And that's what you have to prioritize.
Exactly. What people think what they mean is a family and a career. But when you say you want it all, what you really mean is I simultaneously want to be super successful and also never see anyone ever.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I want.
I want to be a famous introvert, but
I want to be a famous introvert.
They are not compatible. Can't have it all.
So true. That is so funny. I think that's why we're drawn to authoring, because that's as close as you can get.
True. You can be somewhat anonymous.
Yes, exactly. You don't have to be around people all the time.
Okay, so what's weird on TikTok? I have been seeing, sometimes I just see little whispers around TikTok of things and I don't know where they start, but apparently there are people out there who think it is being a sellout or not a real author thing to want to be successful. And I'm like, I don't even know if I believe anyone says that, because who doesn't want to be successful as a writer?
No.
Like, I guess Victoria Aveyard, I don't know how to say that, who wrote Red Queen, she said something about how back before she got published, she wanted Red Queen to be the next big YA series. And people were hating on her for it. Like, you're not supposed to want to be successful. That ruins the starving artist trope. I'm like, starving artists aren't starving because they like to be starving.
No, we don't take pride in the fact that we're starving.
I know.
We want to be starving. That's why we're constantly trying to turn any little hobby into something that can make money, because we're like, this isn't fun to not have any money.
Ugh, it's so true. So
that is so dumb. Weird. I could just kick someone for saying that.
I almost feel like they couldn't have possibly meant that in any sincerity. Who would say that and not immediately go, I'm an idiot?
Right? I don't know. It's oh man, I'm trying to think of like the kind of person that would say something like that.
Yeah.
I can only think like of someone who's like a hipster in all the wrong ways.
Yeah. Like, doesn't want anyone to be successful.
Yeah, because it's not cool, but also they are not struggling for money themselves.
Right. So they're like, artists love being starving. I'm like, says the guy with a meal every night,
Yeah, exactly. Says the guy with the glasses that are for show entirely. The $100 glasses for show.
Some people can't see it all, but
yeah. How dare you?
That guy.
Oh God.
Anyway, so apparently as writers, you're supposed to want to never be successful. And I'm like, I 100% want my books to be the next big thing. I am not ashamed of that.
Take notes, writers. Apparently, if you want to be successful, you're wrong. And we are here to tell you that as the as your resident writing experts. You know what?
Yes.
We should all be starving. Do not make money from your craft. Certainly don't wish to be successful in your craft, because then you are just a phony.
Yeah, let's make reading an underground activity again.
Oh God. Yeah, much less writing. You know what? Let's just stop teaching people to read and write entirely. Let's just
go back to caveman days.
Honestly, if we keep making it so unprofitable, we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I can't live and write. Yeah, it's gonna stop, you guys.
It's true.
That's what people are wishing for.
It's just a secret conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, on that cheery note, what's our word of the week?
Our word of the week is, gosh, I feel like I'm going to butcher this. I think it's pronounced Zenosyne.
Zenosyne.
Zenosyne. I think.
I love it.
It is the sense that time appears to be moving faster and faster. So I thought this was a good like holiday word, because you know how like holidays happen and you start to think back on your childhood. You're like, how old am I?
See, I don't think of like full life wise, because I've forgotten most of my life, but I think, wasn't it just August? And I'm like,
yeah, that too.
Wasn't I just in Florida, like swimming in the water? Wasn't that, what is happening? And now I'm like, okay, well, it's basically December, and okay,
and
that's awesome. Here we are. And then it's going to be like, wow, it's April and I have to move out. My lease is up. Oh God.
Things will be happening.
It's crazy. Zenosyne. Yep. I immediately thought of Xenon, Girl of the Future.
Yeah.
Love those movies.
So good. Such classics.
A true classic.
Yes.
Yeah. See. Well, do you have any other life updates you want to share with the Scripturian Society listeners?
I do, but I'm going to save them for next episode because we're recording 2 again.
So. Okay. Oh, I forgot. You guys, I got back from my anniversary / honeymoon trip.
Yeah, that's right. How was it?
It was awesome. I won't go into crazy detail because we're already, like 12 minutes in or so, but it was awesome. Colonial Williamsburg, if you ever get the chance to visit, do it. It was amazing. It was beautiful. The fall trees and everything everywhere was exactly like it looks in the Hallmark movies. Like exactly. I was like, oh my God, this exists. It was awesome. Javi and I had the best time. I didn't realize he was such a history nerd. So he was so excited, like to go to the Revolutionary War Museum and then to go to the Yorktown Museum. And then we went to Jamestown. So we just did like history stuff basically the whole time. And it was awesome. And we just ate really good food. And then because it's just like a little like historical tourism town, everything shuts down at like 6 p.m. There's nothing to do. So we went back to our hotel. We were just like watching How I Met Your Mother on my computer. I was like,
nice.
This is awesome. Because I'm like, you know what? I really don't want to be out late partying. That's just not my thing. Being back at the hotel by like 6:30 or 7 and like in for the night, I'm like, this is the best trip of my life.
You have an excuse to go back. You don't have to feel bad about missing things because there's nothing going on.
Like the first 2 nights we were like, well, should we go back now? And we're like, no, well, we should, like, it's too early. And then we tried to look around for anything to do and there was nothing. And I was like, oh no, I guess we have to go back to the hotel. And Javi, who's way better at staying up late, is like, I guess so. There's nothing to do. And I'm like, what a pity.
Oh,
and I'm already thinking, what episode was I on of How I Met Your Mother? I can't wait to watch this at the hotel.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it was a good time.
Good stuff. Did you guys do a ghost tour?
We did. Our first night there, we did a ghost tour. So our flight got delayed, so I was afraid we were going to miss it. So we had just enough time to pick up our rental car, get to the hotel, check in, and then put on our warmest clothes. And we went out to Colonial Williamsburg and we went on the ghost tour. And it was so cool. And I actually think I might have seen something spooky, which I am definitely a skeptic. Like, I want to say 99% of the spooky videos Javi shows me, I'm like, absolutely a fake. I know with authority that this is fake. Right. But like, there was this one area of the town that I said I wasn't going to go into detail, but I'll tell my little ghost story since we talked about ghost stories on the other episode.
Yeah, and I asked, so.
Yeah. So the Market Square in Colonial Williamsburg, I guess, used to be a Revolutionary War hospital. And this particular hospital is where there was a surgeon who came to be known as Dr. Devil, because basically anything was wrong with you, he'd amputate. So he was doing all these amputations that didn't need to happen, which of course back then, no sanitization, everybody was basically just dying horrible deaths. And there were apparently like just piles of like limbs around this place. And so people in this have seen along this street, and then later it turned into the market square, which is this big like open pole barn thing where they have the market or whatever. But apparently people have seen like ghost sightings of like soldiers missing their limbs and stuff. Ugh. And I was like, ew, I do not want to see that. Disgusting. But as we were all standing there on the street, I swear I saw a shadow like walk through the pole barn, but then it didn't keep walking. It just like disappeared. And I was like, okay, I wasn't even like freaked out because I was like, that must have been like a shadow from one of the tourists or something. Yeah, it's totally explainable. I mean, I was like, okay, it is weird because no one has gone up yet. Because after like our tour guide would do like a little chat, we could all go up and kind of explore. But we were still getting the chat when that happened. So we were all in the streets. I'm like, okay, weird. I guess it's possible. Maybe it's like a shadow from like, maybe someone else is walking by somewhere, but like not at all alarmed. But then Javi got a picture of the same, like the other area, like the other end of it. And there's straight up a person standing there. And I was like, again, it's a really blurry photo and it's night. So it could be a tourist. So I'm like, probably a tourist. So we leave. So there was only one other thing that was truly like spooky on the ghost tour. And none of that stuff freaked me out because I was like, most likely it's a shadow and a tourist, that's gotta be. And then there was one other stop on the tour that was so spooky. I was like, I'm not going anywhere near that house. I was like, and Javi, you can't either. I was like, we're not even stepping into the grass. It was like bad juju. Like you could feel it. And I was like, I want nothing to do with this. I can't wait to move on. Away. I was like, I'm not engaging. Do not engage with me. And
I am closed to all supernatural phenomena.
Exactly. That was like the only one that felt at all like scary, spooky. Even like the marketplace, like it didn't seem spooky. It was just kind of weird. So I like kind of just blew those off. And then our last day there, we went back to see the Colonial Williamsburg stuff during the day, and we were there all day. And I had to go to the bathroom like 8 times. And so on our way back, we stopped at the bathrooms, like they're right behind the market square, like the building or whatever, where we saw the weird stuff, which I was sure was not weird stuff. And I go into the women's bathroom, the freaking lights won't turn on, no matter how many times I push the damn button. And I was like, I have to pee, and I don't care. So I just turned my phone light on. I was like, here we go. And as we're in there, there's this. It sounds like 100 voices just like screaming at the top of their lungs, mostly female voices, what it sounds like. And it sounds like it's coming from like where the market square is outside, which is, like just right outside. But I'm thinking, okay, so like an 18-wheeler's brakes are squealing or something, like right outside. Like that's what I'm thinking logically, right? So I'm thinking, I'm going to walk out and Javi's going to be like, man, there was almost a collision or something. I walk out and I was like, what happened? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, there was that really loud screeching noise. What was that? And he was like, I didn't hear anything. And he's not messing with me because he takes it too seriously. Yeah. So that really was weird. And then I looked around and realized these are all like the little colonial roads. There's nowhere for an 18-wheeler to drive. Like your cars aren't even allowed on these roads. I don't know why my brain was like 18-wheeler
because that's like the
brakes?
most logical leap for your brain. You're like, it's so loud, it must be that.
Yeah, but no. And so that was just so weird. And it was all that stuff happened in the same spot. So I'm kind of like,
for you.
I am shocked because I cannot express to you how much I didn't expect to see anything or experience anything at all. But I, for sure, I can explain away the possible shadow. I can explain away the picture, most likely, not definitively, but I can explain those away somewhat. I cannot explain the shrieking, screaming voices. It was so weird. Yeah. And I didn't feel like attacked or scared or anything because I was just like, I just want to get out of the bathroom and see what's going on because it sounded like it was outside. Anyways,
you're like curious, and then
nothing. And I was like, were the lights off in the men's bathroom? And he's like, no. And I was like, figures. So also like the lights being out, which again, when everyone's like, oh my God, the lights went out, it's a ghost. I'm like, it's electricity. Like
there's a clear explanation here.
Literally twice on the tour in other buildings, they were like, sometimes the lights turn on and off when the ghosts are active. And we saw lights go on and off like once or twice in these other buildings. And everyone was like, oh my God. And I was like, yeah, because electricity never does that. And Javi was like, stop it. Stop being like
Shut up, Ash. It's kind of like whenever they say there's a cold spot and then you like stand in the spot and you're like, ooh, it's cold. And you're like, draft. It's like clearly the air conditioning.
It's a draft. Exactly.
Yeah. But then sometimes they happen in places where there really should not be a draft. Like, yeah. There's be an explanation, but you're not quite sure.
See, that's the stuff, man. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so it was weird and Javi didn't hear it and he would have heard it. Like if it wasn't so loud. It was so loud. Like people all around the area would have heard it. But yeah, so that's my potential ghost story. I guess it is a ghost story.
It's just that it's all those things in a row. And then the fact
all in the same spot.
Yeah. And it always seems like the thing that convinces you is something you can't prove to other people. Like you can't prove that you heard it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no like video or anything. Yeah. But you just have to trust that people are telling the truth about it and you can't prove it. But
exactly. I think Javi believes me, but he's like, huh, interesting. Like he's just more of a believer. So he's like, as to be expected.
Right. He's like, obviously, duh.
He's like, obviously ghosts. And I'm like, I hate this for me because I was just like debunking this and debunking that.
Right.
But yeah, anyways, that was my ghost tour story.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you have any book recommendations this week?
Yes and no. I'm going to split them between this and the next episode. So since we're kind of already running higher on time, I'm going to tell you my book that I really liked that I read this week. It's weird because I feel like I'm really up to date on all of the young adult releases. And somehow in 2019, I missed this one. I'd never heard of it. It's called This Lie Will Kill You.
Ooh.
And now I'm going to forget the author's name. It's Chelsea something. But it's kind of like One of Us is Lying, if you've ever read that one.
No, but I've definitely seen the cover everywhere.
Yeah. And I think they're turning it into a TV show.
I believe they are.
Like so it's kind of like that, but at a murder mystery party. And it was so good.
Oh my God, I love that. What was it called?
This Lie Will Kill You.
This Lie Will Kill You. Ooh. Yeah. Oh, I want to read it so bad.
And I will tell you, so like up front, I went into it expecting it to be a whodunit. And so I was a little disappointed toward the middle because I was thinking I definitely know whodunit. I figured it out and it feels very obvious. But the key to this book is that it's not a whodunit, it's a how and a why done it.
Ooh.
And so it's like you kind of figure out who it is and you're like, okay, I figured it out. But then all the details kind of come around and you're like, that's why, that's what happened. So it was very good.
Oh, I have to read it. Ah, dang it. Now I really want to read it. I really like a good mystery.
It was on the shorter side. I think it was only like 300 pages, but
I could use that kind of book. Yeah. I don't have any book recs because I was traveling and I ended up, and instead of reading, I tried to make myself work on NaNoWriMo outlining stuff. And I did, thank goodness. But for book recs, I'll give you my own book only because Thanksgiving was yesterday and that book takes place around Thanksgiving. So check out Space Alien Southerners and Saving the World for a holiday read. But yeah, it all takes place around Thanksgiving. I wanted to reread my own book on the plane. And I was like, is this narcissistic? But I didn't. I made myself work on my outline for the new book instead.
Nice. Being responsible.
Oh, so gross. Oh, well. What's our theme?
What? I know we have one. Whether or not you should follow the advice, write what you know.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Ironically, that you didn't know for a second what our theme was.
I wish that had been on purpose, but no, my brain shorted out.
It would have been just very authentic, like just very genuinely acted if it was on purpose.
Yeah. So if you guys have been writing for any period of time, I'm sure you've come across the advice, write what you know. So we're going to talk about whether or not we agree with that. Right off the bat, Ash, do you agree with it?
Okay, well, right off the bat, it gives me strong feelings because I don't like being told to do or not do something.
I know.
So when they're like, only write what you know, I'm like, are you saying I can't write about what I don't know about? And for some reason, I'm like, no, I'm going to do that even more. I'm going to do it even harder. Oh, God. I do think there's something to, right? What you know, I just think that it often gets applied incorrectly. I think the advice can be good. I just think when you generalize it, then it just gets really limiting because nobody wants to read in detail about my everyday life stuff that I'm intimately familiar with. I can tell you all about waterproof audio products. I know a lot about those now, but guess what people don't want to read about in a fiction book?
Waterproof audio things.
Exactly. However, does somebody want to read about ghosts or something that I don't know anything about, but I have ideas about? Yeah. It also depends on the genre, I guess, too. Like if you're going to write something in a genre where like experts will likely be part of your target audience and they're going to be able to call you out,
you have to be very careful.
Be really careful. It can be the same with like historical fiction, because you will inevitably have people who know history reading your book. So if you get something wrong or inaccurate, it can either break the illusion for some people, or people will call you out, which isn't always bad to be called out. But I mean, the fact that it's, then interfered with someone's experience with your story isn't ideal. So a workaround for that, I think, is, historical fantasy.
Right.
And like, it's okay if you twist some facts around or you get some stuff wrong, because you're like, it's a fantasy. It's not strictly historical. But yeah, I think, I don't know. What do you think about write what you know?
I agree. I think a lot of times when people give advice and they try to wrap it up in one nice little statement, you kind of miss what they're actually saying. So write what you know, I think, is good advice. But then what does that mean? What do you know? I think we touched on this in another episode. I think you can know just about anything. And if you do proper research and you put the proper time into thinking about that idea and really going through, if it's science fiction, all of the scientific principles, if it's historical fiction, all the facts. And you don't have to be a scientist or a historian for that to be something you know about. You don't need a degree behind your name or a work experience.
That's true.
So as long as you do your proper research into understanding the topic, then you know it. So then you can write it. And I think sometimes it's taken too far where people think, for instance, that all their characters have to be very similar to themselves. And that just makes for a really boring book.
It does.
You don't want a cast of characters, even if you only have 3 or 4 main characters, you don't want all of them to be too similar. In belief system and, all of the diversity things like gender and race and all of those, like you don't want them all to be the same, because then that's just really boring.
It's true. It's true. I think also with even the things that you need to research, it can be intimidating to think, write what you know, but you're like, but I really want to write a sci-fi, or I really want to write this historical fiction. I think a good workaround is to think, what do you know about the human experience? Because you have human characters in sci-fi and in historical fiction. So, I mean, any book, any genre, what I think the most valuable advice that write what you know has for you as a concept is write what you know about life experience, about relationships, about character, about the way people interact with each other, about humanity. Write that stuff in, and then just don't focus on this, like the little facts that someone's going to call you out for. If you don't have to, you can get pretty far in historical fiction or sci-fi without having to get too technical. There's no rule that says you have to get technical with those things. If the story is about humans and human nature, and not specifically just about a certain thing that happens at a certain time, then it's okay to not go into great detail about the historical aspect or the scientific aspect. So that's where like write what you know kind of falls apart a little bit, because it's I think it only applies to write what you know about life. I don't think it really applies to write what you know about facts and about history, science, whatever it is.
And when
education field.
Right. Like, and when you're picking your theme for your book, if it's something as in, is this something that you've given a lot of thought to? Is this something that you feel you have some insight into? And you don't need to have some kind of concrete life experience to back it up to have something valid to say about it.
Exactly.
So
I would say, as far as write what you know, like any kind of warning of what not to write. I mean, first of all, write whatever you want to write. I mean, your message is going to come through. I would say if you personally feel that you don't know what you're writing about, just research it more. If it's a relationship thing, like if you're like, you know what, I really want to write a book about marriage, but I'm not married. Okay, so you're going to give an outsider's perspective on marriage, which is still valuable. And you can draw observations from the married couples that you know in your real life, and that's great too. But that's where I would hesitate to say, act like you know what it's like from the inside. Because it's likely to be inaccurate, because it's an experience you haven't had yet. You can draw as much observation as you want from the people around you, and you can still have a totally valid piece of fiction about, or nonfiction, whatever you're writing about, marriage. You want to be specific to your experience. Like, you don't want to pretend that you know something that you don't know. I think across the board, don't pretend that you know something that you don't know. I was quite the prude. So I really didn't date much. I really didn't like have any physical relationships. Like, I think I like kissed like 3 people total in my whole life, and made out with literally only my husband. So a lot of my other books, the romance, like the physical romance, is extremely limited between characters, simply because I had no frame of reference. And every time I tried to write something romantic like that, it felt just like I was photocopying out of my memory romantic scenes I'd read in books and movies. So to me, it didn't feel authentic enough when I wrote it. That's also how it felt for me. Maybe somebody else is able to do that, and they're like, no, this still feels authentic. Awesome. For me, it was hard. So that just meant that I did a lot of cutaways, and my books tended to not be romances in any way. They were, whatever this plot is with maybe these characters kind of like each other, but like there wasn't a strong romantic subplot in any of them because it wasn't necessary. It wasn't thing I knew anything about.
Yeah. And if you ever do feel like that, if you yourself are analyzing your own writing and you feel like, I just don't know enough about this to be accurate, then take that cue and don't go into detail about that thing, which is totally fine.
Exactly.
Because there are people out there that don't necessarily need to go into detail about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They'll like it.
Exactly. It's the same with like intangible stuff as it is with tangible. If you find yourself writing something and you're like, oh, I actually don't know this. If it's not something you can go research and learn right away, then maybe just cut away. You don't have to have it in your story necessarily. Like, there's a lot of things you can work around having, or you can just imply that it exists, or you just make it a smaller part of that book. And maybe in the next book, your life experience has changed, or what has changed. In the next book, you can grow that portion of the book more. But I wouldn't do anything that feels inauthentic. I think that's the people's intention when they say write what you know, is that they're trying to stop inauthentic writing from feeling inauthentic, which is very valid. I think that's where the advice comes from, which is not a bad place. You do want your writing to be authentic, but I think it's so often used for evil.
It's just so often
only write what
goes
you know.
Wrong.
Listen, I've never fought a dragon in real life, but I like to read about it. And I like to write about it.
That was going to be my question. Like, at what point does write what you know clash with fantasy fulfillment, or, the idea of escapism and writing things that people don't experience just as a general rule, like dragons?
Yeah, pretty much constantly it clashes. Well, that's the thing is, like, write what you know has, when it comes to fantasy, I feel like specifically write what you know should only be applied to like
the human emotions.
Exactly.
Involved. Yeah.
The human experience in the book. Exactly. Other than that, you can write whatever the hell you want. It's fantasy. That's what's great about the genre. You don't actually have to know shit, which is awesome.
Yeah. You make up your own rules.
Exactly. The only across the board, but especially in fantasy, because it's the only thing you do have to worry about authenticity with, is write about human experiences you know about. And if you're like, I don't have any, yes, you do. Everybody does. Nobody's experience is more valuable or more story worthy than another person's experience. For some people, it might seem that way because that's the human experience we see portrayed in media a lot or in books a lot. Just because your human experience so far doesn't look like that doesn't mean it's any less worthy of being in a story. And don't let people tell you that. I find that infuriating.
Sure. Yeah. So I think on paper, my life has been pretty boring, but I don't feel that way. You know what I mean? Like, just because it hasn't panned out the way that movies and TV shows and books say that it quote unquote should, doesn't mean there hasn't been, lessons learned and valuable experiences. And I think introverts get that sense or that criticism a lot, that, all their lives take place inside most of the time. They have a lot of inner experiences, but those are still valid. They're still experiences.
Yeah, exactly. They're still a very informed human experience. And so they're still very valuable for your writing.
Right.
So yeah, that's the conversation I've tried to have with Hobby too, because he's like, I have so much more worldly experience than you. And I'm like, I don't argue. Absolutely you do. And I'm not jealous. There were certain experiences I probably could have had in my life and I avoided entirely. Other experiences I was lucky for a reason. Exactly. Yeah. Other experiences I just didn't have, or I frankly lucky to not have, which is great. But I don't think it makes my experience my world experience or my internal experience any less valuable than his, and vice versa, or anybody. So don't let anybody make you feel like because you did go through trauma or because you didn't go through trauma that your experience is any less valuable as a human being or as a storyteller than somebody else's. You just need to dig deep and think about, what do I know about me, about my relationships, about what I've experienced, what have I learned, what did I wish I learned sooner, and let that kind of think about it all. What do I think about it all? Exactly. And let that come through in your story and through in your characters, because that's what's way more important than did you get the historical like year correct for this war that happened that most of us actually don't know about anyways.
Right. And that's the kind of stuff that you can fact check later, and other people can help you with that. It doesn't have to, that fact checking, just like grammatical things, anyone can help you with that. But the thing that only you can do in your writing is, you know, your theme and your take on things and all of that. So that's really what you should be focusing on. All that extra detail can kind of come later. It does need to come, but it can be later. It doesn't have to be immediately up front.
I think what I keep seeing happen, and this is where I would caution the write what you know, is I keep seeing this happen. And I think it's because we're used to seeing characters with really tragic backstories. And so basically it feels like a lot of writers, and I've totally done this too, think, okay, well, my characters need to have a really tragic backstory then, or need to have like really like, or they need to have a lot of ongoing trauma with themselves. Okay, well, if you haven't had a particularly traumatic life, that is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. Nobody should look down on you for that.
As someone that had a very happy childhood,
yes,
I feel like this was definitely, I had to come to a place where I accepted that, instead of, because people sort of make you feel like you can't be a good writer if you've had a happy life, if things have gone well for you. Like, if you haven't had trauma, you don't know enough about the world to have any statements about it. And you totally do, because you understand more about how maybe it's supposed to be and how it's healthy, and that can give you insight into things that people with trauma don't have insight into, even though they see things you don't.
It's really all about how much you process intentionally and otherwise, because two people like could go both, like maybe one person has a really happy childhood but never really thinks about it that much. Maybe somebody has a lot of trauma but just pushes it all away and just tries not to think about it and tries to just coast through life. Neither experience in the written word is necessarily going to come through that vividly. The whole point is to think about your own experiences, happy childhood or whatever it is otherwise, and then draw what you've learned from that. And even if you've had a happy childhood, it's not as if you've been untouched by sadness. Everybody's sad. Everyone has seen sad and tragic things happen in their families and the world around them. So it's not like anyone is untouched by misery, which is the idea that it seems like a lot of people are like, oh, you've had a happy life, you don't have anything worth writing about. I hate that.
I always used to get that sense, and I was like, shut up. Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you do. Your story is valid. What you've learned about the human experience is valid. And that just drives me freaking bananas. And so then we get all these characters who are written, and occasionally I will come across a character who's like, my parents have died, I have been abused, I have all of this trauma, and just none of it feels authentic. And I think it's just because, okay, now we've had a writer who, and I don't know these people's, actual background, so I can't say for certain, but it really feels like they've written a stereotype of a character, because now that's what we expect from a character, because we've been taught that the only characters with a story worth telling are ones who have undergone just extreme tragedy, and that is not true. I would like to see more characters who have like a either happy or even just a mediocre childhood. Like nothing particularly horrible has to happen to them, because it's not about what happens to you or doesn't happen to you. It's about what you do with what you have. It's about what you do with what you've experienced. And it's about how much processing and internal thought you put into what you've experienced and what you observe around you. Observation is a big thing too. So
I was going to say, I think sometimes too, we can get really wrapped up in our own experiences, but people around you are going through things too. And if it's a close family member or a close friend, you've been there kind of observing the whole time. And so while you don't know their inner thoughts as deeply as you know your own, you still know, maybe something bad happens to someone and it was because of something they did. And so now you're like, okay, well, I see a cause and effect relationship there. Now I know not to do that. And you can write characters and try to get to the root of, well, what would drive someone to do that in the first place? Like, what is the emotion behind that? Or what is the goal or the motivation behind it? Even though you don't have that motivation, you can sort of use the writing to think about it almost.
Exactly.
And wonder about it and say, what would cause someone to self-destruct? What would cause someone to react badly to this good thing or well to this bad thing?
Yeah.
And so you can take the experiences of the people around you, you can directly ask them, or you can just observe what they're like and use that as well, especially because in books there's usually a main character and side characters, and that's kind of how your life is working too. There's usually a main character with side characters, and they are people with experiences and beliefs that are the same and different from yours. So
yeah, exactly.
You want to include that.
It's kind of like the other side of the coin with the write what you know about human experience. Even if you want to write a traumatized character or whatever, or if you've seen someone else's experience and it hasn't been yours, if you're a good observer, then maybe you can still write about it. That's fine. It's like criminal profilers understand criminals and why they do what they do, but that doesn't mean that they personally have those same motivations and would do what that criminal does. You can study people and you can understand people. I think that's where you want to be empathetic versus judgmental, because if you just watch people to judge, you're not really empathizing with their experiences. So you're not really gaining another, another understanding.
You want to understand.
Yeah. You want to understand.
Even if you ultimately disagree, you can still understand and not be judgmental.
Exactly. And now, bam, horizons are broadened. Now you have a whole new character you can write, or you have a whole new experience you can incorporate into your world, or a whole new theme or something, because now you've observed it and understood it and empathized with it enough that you know where it's coming from. So there's that too. So that's another thing where it's just like, okay, just because you haven't had any quote unquote life experience, which absolutely, I'll try not to curse, but I hate when people say that, because everybody has a life experience. Yeah. So that's
especially when like teenagers are starting to write, and teenagers just by nature of being young are not going to have as many life experiences as a 50-year-old, but they still have, teenagers are probably in their highest form of understanding emotion. I don't know, because they're very
experiencing it.
Yeah, they're reckless usually. They don't know what they're feeling, and so that being closer to that almost gives you more insight than maybe someone that is more mature in their emotions. So you should take advantage of that if you're a teenager, and write while you're in the midst of that.
Yeah.
And not feel like you can't do it just because you haven't been married and had kids or left the country or whatever.
Yeah.
So thinking about This Lie Will Kill You, it's not going to be a spoiler or anything, but that book and One of Us is Lying, one of the kind of similarities between those is that all the main characters have this big, deep, dark secret that they're hiding. And I really like books like that, but every once in a while I'll sit there while reading and think, I don't have any big dark secrets, like I've never done anything horrible. I'm not perfect, but it's not like I've murdered someone, you know. It's not like I was involved in anything criminal or nefarious. And so it's always like, man, no one's ever going to try and kidnap me and get me involved in a murder scheme. I'm never going to be invited to a special murder mystery party. I don't have
I'm trying to invite you to my birthday murder mystery, and you keep giving me a maybe.
Ash, but it's not because you want revenge on me.
No, that's true. I don't want revenge on you.
I just want someone to take revenge on me. But I haven't done anything worth getting revenge over.
And that's not a bad thing.
I know. And so it took a while for me to realize that's okay. There are people out there with big dark secrets, and there are people out there without them, and they both have experiences and things to add, because I do feel like I've definitely been obviously an introvert and more of an observer in from when I was younger. Same. And so even the opportunities that were there for me to have life experiences, I just didn't care to partake because I was interested in watching what happened when other people did.
Same.
And I think that's almost what most writers are like anyway.
Yeah.
Because we like to observe, we like to people watch, we like to see how other people react.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily have to experience everything ourselves to be able to get to the core emotion or motivation there.
To reach the write what you know status or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Which I think why that's true. Really weird advice for writers, because how many writers are going out there skydiving and you know, having 7 marriages and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure there are writers out there that do.
Yeah.
But when it comes to life experiences, I think most writers are more laid back people.
Yeah. We're going through, because every story is really just thought experiment. And that thought experiment is how you learn to empathize with other people. Exactly. It's because you put yourself in their shoes and you try and think about, in this situation, how would I feel? What would I do? And those thought experiments are how we understand other people's experiences, even if it's not what we experienced. And then we take that and we kind of channel it into our work. So the write what you know is such weird advice, because it's the antithesis of what writing is. It's the antithesis of storytelling.
And I think when you tell stories, you want to be realistic, but you don't have to be accurate. Is that what I'm trying to say? You don't have to people who are married, right? Because you kind of brought that up earlier. Every person who's married has a different experience with being married. There isn't a universal experience. There are good marriages, there are bad marriages, there are marriages in between. Within each of those categories, there are different ways that marriages are good and bad and in between. So there's really no wrong way to write it, except that you want to make sure it's realistic.
So if you're like, if you haven't put any thought into what married life is like, if you haven't been observing people and doing those thought experiments on your own to think, what would I do in this situation, in this relationship, and looking at people around you, then at that point, I guess you don't qualify for quote unquote write what you know. But if you're going to if you're planning to write a book about it, I'm assuming you probably already have done that stuff. And so then it's valid.
So like if you're writing about a good marriage, you don't want to be unrealistic and pretend like the couple never fights or that they never have disagreements, because that's just not the way it works. That's not the difference between a happy and unhappy marriage. But you can write that they argue less than some people, or you can write that they argue about only certain things, or a variety of different types of conflict that would still lead to happiness ultimately. So there are a lot of different ways to go about that. And so writing what you know, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the exact experience you had or the exact experience that someone around you had.
No,
it can be, I have several examples of happily married people or unhappily married people, and I'm going to just explore what might be behind that or how it could illustrate itself in another way.
Exactly.
And as long as it's not unrealistic or like insulting.
Just like you're just collecting ingredients from everything you see around you, and then you can combine them however you want to make whatever you want. And you know how those ingredients will react with each other if you've observed them enough. So that's true of if you're going to write a book about married couples, and it's you're observing married couples. If you want to write a book with a character with a really tragic backstory, maybe you have tragedy in your own life, or there's tragedy in the people's lives around you. That too, sure. I think it's funny because I realize we've lived through and are still living through a pandemic, essentially.
It's true.
And I wrote a book before the pandemic started about like a plague or whatever. And that was a situation where, because I hadn't lived through it, like the plague wasn't unrealistic. I just hadn't gone into any detail about what like life was like living during a plague. Right. And so now post-pandemic, I'm like, okay, I've got some life experience now. And now I can go back in and flush it out. And I can add a bunch of details where there weren't any details because there didn't need to be any details necessarily. But now that so it was fine before, but now that I have personal experience, I get to see how everybody around me reacts to it. I'm like, okay, got it.
So the book I'm doing my big overhaul on is about like a pandemic that sweeps through my like fantasy land, and it sounds weird to say I love it because of like it's a disease that kills a lot of people, but I think it's a good plot thing, It's very interesting. And sometimes I am shocked by how accurate I was in predicting how people would react to a pandemic. Like I look back at it and I'm like, I was pretty spot on about a lot of things. I had a whole quarantine going. I had people like not listening to the quarantine, and then debates about vaccines versus cures versus free will. And I was like, man, I was really on point. But the weird thing that I was really off on was that I called it a plague when it was a pandemic. And it wasn't until the pandemic hit that I really looked into what the difference was, which I know seems like a really small detail, but even just that small detail is now fleshed out because I have gone through it. And I think the reason I was able to predict, I could be like, oh, I'm psychic or something, but I think it has to do with being able to observe human behavior and being able to predict, okay, how do humans react to bad things in general? and how do different personalities react to the same thing.
Yeah.
And then just mixing all those ingredients to kind of figure out how they would react to something very specific like a pandemic.
Yeah. So you did all the thought experiments necessary to finish your research to put that in. Whereas I did not. I just decided not to put any detail about the plague in my book because I didn't want to do it at the time. I was like, I'm focusing on other things. So I didn't. And I think that's fine too. So just my computer's dying. That's why I sound like I'm getting farther away from the microphone.
I thought maybe it was a cat.
For once, it's not. For once, they're being good, and I'm screwing up my own setup. There we go.
Yeah, it is important too that if you're working on a book to know that if you don't have that personal experience yet, you can write the book and the experience might come to you later.
It might,
you might understand it later.
And if it the key is don't pretend to have experience that you don't have / that you haven't thought about.
Yeah. And I guess the key is like, you don't want to come across to your readers as someone really arrogant and also really wrong.
Yeah.
Because arrogance is annoying on its own as is when they're right. But when you're arrogant and wrong, that's just a level of
worse
irritation that I just can't even express how angry that makes me so much.
Yeah.
So don't talk down to people in your writing ever, but if you're going
seriously.
to, please at least know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's true. And also, okay, this is I'm going to say in this tiny application, don't write what you know, in the sense that, so when I worked as an editor for a while, I kept getting clients. It was usually men. With this specific issue, it was always men.
Yeah.
Who would write like a bunch of really specific information about some very specific field that clearly they do in their real life. And I was like, you don't need, like, one of them was like some kind of like really technical engineering stuff. And I kept having to be like, you do not need to go into detail with all this engineering stuff.
You're slowing the plot. Please stop.
Exactly. You're slowing the plot. Like anything in the book, whether even if it's something you know really, really well, and you're like, no, but I know all these facts and I want to put them in. I know this field so well, and it happens to be a part of the story. If it doesn't serve the plot, don't include it. That's across the board, whether it's something that you just know really well or some scene you want to put in. I know you love it. It's valuable. Save it for yourself. Don't put it in the book. Take it out of the book.
Or make it so important in the plot that all of those facts actually become relevant.
Yeah.
And that you can kind of sprinkle them throughout instead of an info dump of here's everything I know about.
Do not do info dumps, guys. It is tempting, especially if you've been researching something. I used to do this with mythology because I would research mythology so much. And then I would just info dump it into the book. And I'm like going back and you know what? This is not interesting. And it doesn't even just slow down the plot. It's just like a screeching halt to the plot when you info dump. So you're like, but I know so much. We know. And don't worry. It'll come through because it'll make the voice of your writing sound more confident. You're going to sound more authoritative, like you know what you're talking about, even if you don't get to say everything you know about it.
Yes. And I think too, if you're like a first-time writer or you're writing a first draft, this is weird advice, but I would actually advise info dumping. Just do it up front for yourself so you feel like that information is in there. And then after you've written it out, as you're working on that first draft or as you're going through and editing, you're going to find spaces where that information, little pieces of it, is actually more relevant and is actually going to have a bigger impact. And then you take out the info dump originally and see what you included that was important throughout the story.
Yeah.
So there's a strategy that I use a lot because I do a lot of info dumping up front, but then by the time I'm on like edit 2, it's all gone because going through the story and actually writing it reveals to you where that information is supposed to go. But you have to know it well enough up front to be able to see where it goes.
That's true. I kind of do the reverse where I put, I do this with all of my notes for my writing. Like I put my summary and my outline and all of my, anything I'm thinking about for the book all goes at the bottom of the document. So I see it before I click off, but I do that with my info dump with whatever research I've done. So I don't like write it into the book, but I will put all of my research there at the bottom
in the same place.
And then I cross it out when I include it in the book. And I'm like, nice.
Yeah.
I did it.
I'll like delete it if I do that. And so then it just gets smaller and smaller until finally I'm like, yes, I included everything.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah.
Let's see. Should I have another point? Did you have another point?
No.
I feel like I had another point. Writing what you know. If I say it out loud, will something occur to me? No. I'm just staring at my shelf at a little unicorn eraser, and my mind went blank again. See, this is why you shouldn't write what you know, because sometimes you know nothing, even words.
Sometimes I don't even know how to speak.
Yeah,
it's very true. Yeah, I mean, like I'm writing a book about like there's a bunch of gondolas. Do I know anything about being a gondolier?
Right.
Hell no. Does it matter that much to the plot? No, I'm just going to be really, instead of talking about how the gondola works, I'm going to be talking about what's going on inside the gondola.
Right. We all just care about the inside of the gondola.
Nobody cares what the gondola is made out of specifically.
Right.
I'm going to give a general description, and then it's going to be all about the dialogue and the sound of water on the side of the gondola. And, you know,
I will say, if you do know like random, very specific facts about something, give that knowledge to a really unimportant character that's only there for like 10 minutes, and then just have them kind of spouting it as other things are going on. I do that every once in a while when I know weird things about something. So I just wrote a scene about map, like that took place in a map maker shop, and like I don't know that much about map making, but I actually looked stuff up because this guy who was literally in half of one scene of an entire series is just like so into maps.
Oh my God.
They're like, hey, do you think we're about to be under attack? And he's like, here's the paper that I use to make this kind of map. You know, just that kind of stuff. So if you do have like really niche facts that you want to get out, just give them to a side character in more of a humorous moment, and you'll feel satisfied, and it'll get the point across even if your reader is not like super into that thing.
That's true. You can create like an expert character in their field specifically for the purpose of delivering that information.
Right. Yeah. As long as, I think, and to get over the idea that it's not relevant to the plot, you just make it a kind of a sign of life outside of your main characters.
Yeah.
I saw this somewhere recently where, you know, if your character is walking down a street, there should be graffiti on walls sometimes, because there are people that exist aside from your main character and their problems. So when your character is just buying something from a store or interacting with a random family member that's never going to become important again, you can still give those people personality traits and make them whole people. And that can be a way to, you know, dispense those facts that you just feel are really important. The reader's not going to find it boring because they're just going to get the sense of a human person outside the main character. They're not going to care about the specifics, but you can.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I agree. So overall, write what you know. Do we agree or do we disagree?
Overall, agree, because I think you can know a lot of things. And I mean, if you read a lot of fantasy books, you know a lot about fantasy. Go ahead and write about dragons. They don't have to be real.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to be a dragon tamer in real life.
Yeah. So write what you know, with the caveat that you can know just about anything enough to write about it. You just have to
know what you're writing about. That's what you should say. Know what you're writing about.
Homework could look like research, or homework can look like thought experiments based on observations of the world around you. And they are both perfectly valid, and definitely do them. Don't not do them. You do need to know it. But you, just because you don't know it inherently doesn't mean you can't have it in your story.
Yeah. There's like the general good criticism of write what you know, where people are like, okay, but what does that mean? And then there are always the people that are like, well, I'm just going to write this thing that I know nothing about and it'll be fine. And it's like, no, now it's a bad book.
No, it's
don't
a bad
be that
book.
Person.
Don't put in the work.
Be cocky. Yeah. Put in the work. Write what you know, because you know about what you're writing about.
Because you've taught yourself it. If you didn't already know it, you've taught it to yourself, and that's fine. Self-taught.
Yeah.
So I have to learn a little bit about something about gondolas, maybe.
Yeah, just a little bit. I'm just picturing
I do actually. You know what? I think I know. I've seen them in real life on multiple occasions. I feel like that's plenty.
I just now want you to have a random character that's like, as they're going by in the gondola, just a tourist is like, that is this type of gondola and it's made of this type of wood. And then the voice fades out as they get farther away.
Did you know gondolas were invented in blah, blah, blah by blah, blah, blah?
The characters are just having a serious conversation as some tourist is like, I love this kind of gondola because it does this, that this doesn't, this type doesn't. I don't know.
I just put into my outline that their gondola gets stolen at one point. So maybe I'll have the nerdy character be like, oh, my special gondola from this year crafted by this person with this wood that can never be replaced or something.
That's kind of how I feel whenever people who are really into cars try and describe their cars. Like, this is my 2005 Ford pickup, da 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 da. And I'm like, I just need to know that it's a vehicle.
I love that you said Ford pickup as
is
like
not
a
a
fancy
thing?
car. No, a Ford pickup truck is absolutely a thing. It's just so funny because it's not a fancy car.
Well, just any car. Like, people that are just really into their cars, they're like, that is a 1970 Camaro. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I know the year 1970.
Yeah. I want to know more about cars, and I can follow along until people are like, this is my 2015 BRZ XQY. And you're like, stop saying
with
letters.
4-wheel drive and 70 horses. I'm like, great.
70 horses.
I don't know. I know nothing about cars, and I don't want to know anything about them, but someone out there does. And sometimes they point it out in books, and I'm like, this feels legit because some people out there like cars.
It's true. Javi's one of those people who likes cars. Yes, indeed. I like to work on some cars, like with Javi. I used to like working on our old truck, but do I know cars? Like, do I know like the names of cars? No. I don't know the difference between any of them.
Or do I? I know my car, and that's about it. And only barely. So
anyway, I sometimes forget what my car is called. So my car's got like it's all like electrical stuff. So like there's not much I can do to fix it. So I'm just kind of like not that interested. This is why older vehicles are better. But anyways, that's a tangent I won't go off on.
I was gonna say my dad taught me to change a tire and change my oil, and I no longer know how to do either.
I can change a tire.
Tell me many times.
I could change my oil. I've been shown how to multiple times. I've just never done it because I don't often check all of my levels anyways, and I always have a coupon to get my oil changed. So I'm just like, here, have a coupon. Thanks. You can check all my stuff and change my oil. And they're like, yeah. So I'm like, that's easier, but I can change a tire.
I can change a tire in theory. I can't change it like physically. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm not strong enough.
You're totally strong enough. I can change the oil in theory. I just haven't done it. So I wouldn't trust myself to do it. But I can replace the passenger side wing window on a Ford F-250, on an old Ford F-250, because I broke the passenger side wing window. And then I had to go to a junkyard and find a replacement part. And they gave it to me for a discount because I'm a girl.
Sweet.
And I was like, sexism for the win. Thanks, guys.
Gosh, I love sexism.
Yeah, for real. God, I keep saying.
I can't believe I just said that into a mic.
I said hooray for misogyny TikTok on That Pretentious Book Club once, which was sarcastic again. But I keep saying these really iconic things that shouldn't be said.
This is the kind of stuff that one day when we're famous, people will go back and find and take out of context to ruin our lives.
Absolutely. And I said something earlier in the episode.
Succeeded.
Yeah, I said something earlier in this episode that I thought that's going to be taken out of context. It was something about trauma. I don't remember. And I'm like, that is for certain going to be taken out of context at some point.
For sure. That's when we'll know that we've made it. So feel free to use us out of
people
context.
Start to misquote you on purpose. Yeah. Oh, God.
But yeah, in short, if you don't know anything about cars, don't write about them. But even if you don't own a car, you can do proper research.
Yes.
And then write about them.
Then you can write about them. It's true. Absolutely. That's a great conclusion.
Thank you.
Do you have any writing quandaries this week you've been dealing with that you would like to share?
I mean, I'm just writing about my own personal pandemic. Nothing really to share. So
alrighty. Well, I'm trying to think if I do. Nope. I got my outline done. It's just that I'm tired. And so it's like I finally got the chance to I have not taken a break from work for more than 2 days in years. Years. Because even when I used to work at a preschool, and people who knew me then would be like, but the preschool closed down for a week at a time. Yeah, well, guess what? I had multiple jobs.
Yeah.
So I always have multiple jobs. So even if one job I technically they're closed or something, I'm working my other job. And right now I still have multiple jobs. I just don't get paid for all of them.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of jobs. So exactly. So I actually got everything done before my anniversary trip. So for the first time in years, for the first time since like right when I graduated college and my mom and I went to Ireland. Since then, I have not had a break for more than like 2 days straight ever. And not even those days, I've always had something to do. So for like 5 days straight, I didn't have any work to do of any kind at all. And it was amazing. Oh my God. It was so fabulous. I could cry. So I'm just, that's been my writing quandary, is that now I'm like, okay, I have a little bit of time now because I got everything done so far in advance that I could come back and not feel overwhelmed by everything. Like I had to set it up that way, or I knew I was going to start working even while I was still on my trip. So the good news is I'm not like overwhelmed with the flood of things that I just pushed off, but I'm also like, I should keep enjoying this free time while I have it. And instead of writing or reading, which I also have to do. But my brain is like, you could take a nap right now. And like, I didn't used to take naps either. I took like 3 naps on our trip and it was awesome.
Deserve it. I love naps.
Right? It's amazing because but the thing is, the caveat with naps that I won't go super into because no one cares. But listen, if I am not allowed to nap until my body naturally wakes up from the nap, I am a absolutely monstrous person. I become like a straight up evil villain. I am just full of rage and I will be mean on purpose. And I don't know what's wrong with me. I just like, I wake up so mean.
Angry.
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm like furious, just furious that I had to wake up before my body was ready. And I don't get mad in the morning when my alarm goes off. I just get sad. But if it's from a nap for some reason.
Yeah, naps are weird. The best naps are the naps you take after having not napped for a while. So it's been 2 weeks since a nap and you're like, I'm just going to take, a 2-hour nap. And then it's a half hour or an hour and a half hour nap. And you wake up, you're like, that was the best nap of my life. Exactly because you're not used to it. But then you get into a habit of it and it becomes an addiction. And every time you wake up, you're like, why am I like this? My life is falling apart.
See, I have the opposite problem where I don't let myself nap ever. So I just go. And then I'm like, my life is falling apart. Yeah. Because I never take a break.
The solution is really to just get 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. But we don't do that as writers.
No, it's true. But then even when I still think every now and then it's good to take a nap because some days you're just using way more energy than you need to, man.
It's true. I do have a theory. I think there are some days when you're either mentally stressed or you're physically stressed, like your body is in the early stages of some kind of cold or something, and you need the nap. And if you just let yourself take it, you'll be so much better off in the long run.
I absolutely agree. I can so many times that I've been like, God, I'm really tired and I should take a nap, but I have a million things to do. So when I do wake up sick the next day because my body was like, yo, we tried to tell you.
We tried to warn you and you did nothing. Here's an extreme cold.
Yeah, it's like I tried to make you fall asleep at your desk and you didn't take the freaking hint. So here, be sick for a few days and you still have to work while you're sick.
We did everything we could. That you have only yourself to blame.
Yep, exactly.
Yes.
Anyway, if you guys want some more of this delightful duo, you guys can follow us on social media, especially if you want more of Lewis, aka Karissa, because she's all over our TikTok. She's got the best writing TikTok videos. And when I say the best, I do mean the best. If you are a writer and you want to be entertained or you want to procrastinate, but you want to feel like you're not procrastinating, go check out the Scriptarian Society on TikTok. It's a bunch of writing themed funny videos. And Karissa is the star of 99.99% of them because I rarely get on that TikTok.
I do my best.
You can also follow us on Instagram at the Scriptarian Society, which is particularly fun because you get these like daily writing advice, like Canva things that Karissa makes, which obviously then Karissa makes them again. Karissa is our social media queen. So everybody bow down to Karissa and also follow the Scriptarian Society because I am very grateful for all she does for our social media.
You're welcome.
I make very occasional appearance.
You do all the sound editing and stuff. Though,
I do the
I know
editing.
nothing about that.
Yeah, see, I do the editing for this and for That Pretentious Book Club, our sister podcast, and I do most of the social for That Pretentious Book Club. So what ends up happening is that one is all Karissa and the other one is all me.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Our next week's episode is going to be all about how to write a good villain, which I have so many thoughts about. And I'm so excited because I love a good villain. So we'll see you guys next week. We hope you had a good Thanksgiving. And until next week, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.
Bye. Okay.